Imagine you found a river made of gold, not a metaphor, a literal river, pure, endless, 24-karat gold. You take from it once, and your family is set for generations. You take from it for a century, and your country becomes one of the richest places on earth. Now imagine, 300 years later, that same country is still beautiful, still stable, still functioning, but struggling to create enough income for its own people. That actually happened. This is Portugal, and this is one of the most misunderstood economic stories in the world. Because this is not really a story about gold. It's a story about what happens when wealth arrives without pressure. When an economy receives value, but doesn't have to build the systems that create it. We're going to break this down into 3 parts. First, how Portugal built one of the earliest global economic systems. Second, how external wealth reshaped its internal incentives. And third, how that pattern reappeared in the modern economy. Because once you understand the structure, you start to see something much more precise than a rise or a fall. A system that worked, but within limit it didn't choose. In the 15th century, Portugal made a decision that separated it from the rest of Europe. While most powers competed for land, Portugal moved toward the ocean. It built ships designed not for war, but for distance. It developed navigation systems that extended beyond known maps. And it constructed a network of ports instead of a continuous empire. This mattered because Portugal was not trying to control territory. It was trying to control the flow. Spices, metals, labor, agricultural goods. Portugal positioned itself at the intersections. By the mid-1500s, Lisbon had become one of the central nodes of global trade. Wealth moved through the country at an unprecedented scale. But there was a structural detail embedded in that model. Portugal was exceptionally good at coordinating trade, but it was less exposed to the pressure of industrial competition. It did not need to produce the cheapest textiles. It did not need to develop manufacturing efficiency at scale, because it was capturing value through position, not through production. At the time, this looked like an advantage, and for a while, it was. In the late 17th century, gold was discovered in Brazil. And because Brazil was under Portuguese control, that gold flowed directly into Portugal, not in small quantities, but consistently over decades. This kind of inflow does not collapse an economy. It changes how it behaves. Imports become easier. Domestic production becomes less urgent. Short-term wealth reduces long-term pressure. Over time, Portugal increasingly relied on external manufacturing. Goods could be purchased rather than produced. Labor shifted toward sectors that could not be imported: construction, services, administration, and land. And this created a structural imbalance. Because while wealth was increasing, productive capacity was not expanding at the same rate. This is not a moral failure. It is a mechanical outcome. When external wealth substitutes for internal development, growth becomes less dependent on building capacity, and that changes the system's trajectory. Because the constraint doesn't appear immediately. It appears later when the external flow slows, and the internal base is not strong enough to replace it. Fast forward to the modern economy. Portugal integrates into the European Union. It adopts the euro. And once again, capital becomes easier to access. Credit expands. Consumption rises. Growth accelerates. But productivity does not keep pace. And by 2010, the system reached its limit. Deficits rise. Debt increases. Market confidence collapses. Portugal is forced into a €78 billion bailout. And this becomes the defining moment of the modern economy. Because from that point forward, Portugal restructures itself around stability. Fiscal discipline becomes central. Debt reduction becomes non-negotiable. Growth shifts toward external demand. Exports increase. Tourism expands. the system stabilizes, and by most macroeconomic measures, it works. Debt falls, unemployment declines, growth becomes consistent. But the structure matters, because the sectors driving this recovery, like services, tourism, and real estate, are reliable, but not highly scalable in productivity. So the system achieves balance, but it limits acceleration. And this is where the historical pattern quietly reappears. Not as a repetition, but as a familiar structure: external reliance, controlled growth, constrained upside. So what does Portugal represent today? Not failure, not collapse, but something more subtle: a successful stabilization, an economy that learned from the crisis, that reduced risk, that restored balance, that built resilience. And those are real achievements. But they come with a trade-off. Because what improves stability often reduces flexibility. What protects the system can also limit how far it can expand. So over time, a tension forms. Growth exists, but within boundaries. Employment exists, but income progression is slower. The system works, but doesn't fully lift. And that tension is not unique to Portugal. It is increasingly visible across advanced economies. So the next time you look at Portugal, or any economy that appears stable from the outside, look a little closer. Not at how it looks, but how it functions. Because the most important economic systems are not the ones that collapse. They're the ones that hold together, while quietly narrowing the range of possible outcomes inside them. Portugal did not lose its place in the global economy. It secured one. But once a system is built around maintaining balance, the hardest thing to recover is momentum.